This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about the Xbox handheld reportedly coming this year, the changes to recommended specs for Doom the Dark Ages, Chrono Trigger's 30th anniversary projects coming this year, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 75. I am your host, the man who can practically parry the pursuer in his sleep, except when he can't, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who uses his Steam Deck OLED like a boomerang to defend himself, Justin, better known as I'm Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
Well, this week has just been, I mean, it's been a good week, I'll say, but just a lot of different stuff has happened or things have been set up. So last week, or at least last Wednesday, Thursday, I should say, we were talking about the RX 9070 XT coming out and stuff like that. And I mentioned to you that I was going to stop past Micro Center after work to see if they had any more units available. Unfortunately, they had most of them were sold out except for maybe the high end where the prices was like $800, and I was like, at that point, it's not worth it. Yeah. So I didn't bother going. But on Friday night, I checked the website again to see what they had available at the store closest to me, and I saw that they had a few that were a little lower, and I said, okay, maybe tomorrow morning I'll stop by and see what happens. So Saturday I went over there and I went inside, and of course there were people, inside looking for one, and I saw it's like, oh, looks like there aren't any here. So I went to I stood in line, waited to talk to someone, said, do you have any more 9070 XTs available? He said, I'm sorry, we're all out. We only have 9070s. And I was like, all right, give me a second. So I quickly pulled a line because it took me quite a while to get over there, and I really did not want to leave empty-handed. But at the same time, I know from what I said before, the 9070 was not worth buying. Mm-hmm. But I looked up some specs, some reviews and stuff, and apparently I was a bit misinformed. Granted, I hadn't seen the reviews yet because it was like the day after the XT came out that the reviews for the base 9070 went out, and I looked and I saw that considering what it is, it's actually pretty decent. It's even though it's just like $50 cheaper, it is a bit more energy efficient, but it still has some good performance. So I said, okay, screw it, I'll go ahead and get a 9070. So I got a Red Devil a power color Red Devil 9070, and so that is now going into the new build I'll be making eventually. Except the problem I did not realize is that the 9070 and I guess XT, they're all 3-slot cards, and the problem with that is the fact that I was going to do a dual PC setup, and originally the 6650 XT, which is what I was going to use for AMD, was a 2-slot GPU, and so I was like, that should be fine with my 3080 Ti. And I was like, now I'm thinking about it, and like, oh, I don't know if both cards will fit in my case, so I'm gonna have to check and see what happens there. But at least that's available for right now for when I eventually build that PC. But because I did get that new GPU, the 6650 XT, I put that in the current PC that I'm using right now, and I'll talk about some of that when the games I play. And it definitely gave me a good bump, a very noticeable bump up from the RX 580. And I am quite pleased with the performance that I am getting for what it is. So that's definitely good. And then also, I guess, in some other news that came in, so I was going to, I think I might have mentioned this one point at the time, set up a sort of not a Plex server. I can't remember what it is exactly, but essentially a server in my house. So that way I can rip my Blu-rays and DVDs and have them on a local storage.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I could just watch them anywhere around the house, sort of like using Netflix or something like that. So a few weeks ago, I saw there was a sale on a Blu-ray drive that is compatible for doing stuff like that. It came in Monday, and so right now I just realized I should have purchased an enclosure for it, so I just need to get that. But then after that, I'll have everything I need to essentially get all that set up, so then I can sort of start working on that. And then finally today, the thing I hinted to last week came in, so I'm very excited for that, and I'm hoping that I can start recording it on maybe the weekend, maybe Saturday. I'm just waiting on one last thing. And this is the thing that I really am not. It's insane. Is the fact that, and this sort of hinting at what it is, but GameCube component cables are so expensive. I mean, even looking at used on eBay, they start around $50-$60. And these are pre-owned.
Yeah.
And if you want to buy a new one, it's in the range of $100-$200 plus for a GameCube component cable. I mean, yeah, sure, like regular composite cables are standard and they're more common, or at least they were more common. But I didn't expect it to be this expensive, so I looked and I eventually found a cheap third-party one for like $15, and so I said, I'll give this a whirl. I'm not paying that much money just for a cable. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for what's coming up. But that's it. That's everything I've got.
Very nice. Yeah, getting the 9070. I mean, it's too bad you couldn't get the XT, but still, that's going to be a nice bump. And of course, you said RX 580 and then 6650 was the other one you had.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
the 6650 XT.
Out of curiosity, just because I don't know, is that so 6650? Is that basically just the generation following, or is that further
That's
a bigger jump?
That one's sort of like 2 generations from the 580.
Okay.
Because the 60,000 series was roughly around the time that the RTX 30 series was.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, that's still good. That's great.
Yeah, and like I think power-wise, it's roughly around a 2070 Super. I think is roughly how powerful
Okay,
it is.
that's nice. Yeah, I think that's probably more powerful than my 2080 Ti, but I'm not positive.
Nah, I think
What's
the
the
2080 Ti is still more powerful.
What's the VRAM on that?
8 gigs? I think.
Okay, yeah. 2080 Ti is 11. So cool. Well, I'll have some PC upgrade news as well, which I've already shared with you, but I'll talk about that here in a little bit. First, I'll talk about some other stuff that's been going on. So, make sure I'm not forgetting stuff. So, okay. Sorry, my brain is just like I'm trying to process everything that's happened. Didn't have a whole lot of productive days over the weekend. I mean, I got some stuff taken care of, but it wasn't like, I think apart from just practicing and then helping with music on Sunday, I can't really think of anything else specifically. Like, I feel like there's some practical thing that I got done, and I don't remember what it was. I guess I can mention, with the puppy, she's doing pretty well. She's getting better at sleeping through the night in her kennel and not, whining in the middle of the night. So that's been great. And I've been, taking her and Bear, our other dog, out for walks every day. So that's worked out pretty well. She's definitely still not great on the leash, and it's mostly it. I mean, like I have a flexi leash for her, which is like one of those that's like retractable. So that's helpful, and then I also have a thing called Gentle Leader, which it's like a strap that goes around the nose and behind the ears, which helps to keep them from pulling. And it's worked great for Bear because he's a 90 to 100 pound dog, so he's a big boy. And I mean, I think Indy is probably like I want to say because she's only not quite 8 months old, and I don't know how big she's gonna get, but she's like probably 30 pounds, 35, something like that. Pretty light. But anyway, so, we got one of those for her, and that helps to keep her from pulling. But the thing is that she's not used to working with it, and so she keeps getting tangled in it. Like, get stuck under one leg or get stuck under two legs. And so, like, half the time I'm just keeping the leash right up next to me, not even letting her have any leash to work with, because she just gets tangled up. Or she'll go over by Bear's leash and then get tangled up in his leash, and then I have to untangle it, and it's just but yeah, it's been good. Thankfully, walking them both at the same time has worked out well, so I've been pleased with that. But let's see here. I will say I haven't done anything video recording or editing wise, apart from the podcast itself. Oh, I did get the channels all set up, at least on Rumble for the podcast and for everything else. I just haven't. The podcast is the only thing I've actually put up episodes so far, and I've only put up a handful. I was meaning to do that, go through and do a bunch of them on Saturday, and I can't remember what I had going on that kept me from being able to work on that. I think it was I probably had some other things rendering that I wasn't able to get to it. So anyway, I wasn't able to really do anything with that, but and I don't know if I'm even going to have time to do it between now and next Friday when I do my Extra Life stream, because I'm going to have to do various setup things, making sure that I have everything ready to go for doing that 24-hour stream. And then also, I have to update the graphics and stuff to work with the dual PC setup again, because although I have the stuff for Stack Up in there, I haven't updated it to go with Extra Life. So I need to do that modification, and then because of the big change that's coming with my PC, that's also going to impact when I can work on that side of things. And I'll get to that momentarily. I'm trying to think of what else. I know that there's some other stuff. Doing music again on Sunday. Just once again playing support, basically playing and singing, but not actually leading, so I don't have to worry about that. I do have to lead on the weekend after I do my 24-hour stream, the Sunday right after. So I'll be, going to bed at like 9 a.m. on Saturday, waking up at probably like noon, 1 o'clock, because that's usually what I do after a 24-hour stream, so I can sleep normal hours. And then Sunday morning, the next day, I will be leading at church. So my goal is to get songs picked out by Sunday for next weekend, and then we can practice probably just as early in the week as possible. I don't know exactly when it's going to be. I guess at the very latest it would be Thursday, but I'm hoping not to wait until that late, because since I have to edit the podcast on Thursday as well, it's just kind of like I don't want to be up really late. It's the main thing. I want to make sure that I get to bed at a good time and get plenty of sleep before doing the 24-hour stream. So okay, so I guess then I can get into the stuff related to the PC. So first of all, I got my bonus from work, which was, a good amount of money. And I just decided, well, I've been talking already about getting an OLED monitor. And so I went ahead and I found a used like new monitor where basically just the packaging is slightly damaged, but the monitor itself is in great condition. Saved me like somewhere between $50 and $70, something like that. So it was, a good amount of savings. One thing I will say though, the last time I bought new PC parts, at least like, like the bigger purchases, was when I lived in Alaska and we didn't have sales tax. And so it was like, oh man, I got to pay sales tax. And so it ended up, costing more than I wanted it to, but it was still cheaper getting a used version. So anyway, initially my thought was, okay, I'm going to get this monitor, and then I am going to be getting a Switch 2 at launch. And I'm still leaning towards getting the Switch 2 at launch, mostly because my kids are using my Switch quite a bit lately. And since we already, since we have 2 Switches, we have one that my wife uses, and then we have one that is mine that the kids have been using. So the plan, at least right now, is that it's going to be the OLED is going to become my wife's, because she doesn't play a lot of games, but she does play Animal Crossing and occasionally some other stuff. And of course, it's the nicer of the 2 Switches. So I want her to have the nicer one. And then the kids will get the original launch model Switch that they can play with. And then I will get the Switch 2. And then just, eventually I'll upgrade to the OLED Switch 2. Unless by some miracle, Nintendo says, we're going to have an OLED model at launch, in which case I'll just be like, yes, immediately, yes. But the plus side is that with that, even though I can't enjoy the OLED screen on the handheld itself, now I will have an OLED monitor that I can enjoy the games on. And if all the upscaling stuff works out well enough, it might actually even look really good on my monitor. It should be great. But, we'll see about that when we actually get official information. So anyway, I went ahead and I ordered the monitor after I found out about my bonus. And initially was thinking, okay, I'll use part of my bonus as well for getting the Switch 2. But then I was just kind of looking into it and thinking, well, although I don't think getting a new graphics card right now is really reasonable, I did find out that the graphics card itself does not require a new motherboard, which is great. However, the thing is that I realized that my big issue, especially with my new monitor being 1440p, is that while there are plenty of games where my computer will easily be able to run 1440p, still get great frame rates and everything else, there are still examples of games where, as it stands right now, when I'm running them at 1080p, I'm only getting, 70 to 100 on average frames per second, and bumping up to 1440p could end up hurting that a bit more. But that's mostly with games that are open world, and open world games are notoriously CPU bottlenecked. So I started looking into, okay, I think I want to grab the current highest end version of the AMD Ryzen CPU. At least I think it's the highest end. It's either the highest or one of the highest end, because the 3D models that are coming sometime in the not too distant future, those ones will be the highest end and everything else, but I could get the other one a little bit cheaper, once again buying it technically used. And it's still a big upgrade over what I have. But the thing that didn't occur to me until I talked to my buddy Zach today is that I was going to need to upgrade my motherboard and my RAM if I wanted to get the new CPU. And initially I'm just like, I don't know if I really want to do that. Because, I should have remembered that it was the same thing the last time I upgraded my CPU, which was in 2019. I upgraded my CPU in 2019 to the i9-9900K. And at that time, because of the way Intel CPUs particularly are set up, I could not use it with my existing motherboard and my DDR3 RAM. I had to upgrade. So I had to get a new motherboard, had to get DDR4 RAM, and so I did that. And same deal this time. Except the one positive about going with AMD, from what my buddy was telling me, is that AMD actually continues to support their older stuff to where you don't have to upgrade the RAM necessarily for a long time. It's going to be a while before it needs to be upgraded to DDR6, which will obviously be the next iteration of RAM. So that's a very good thing. So I did a little bit of digging and ended up just going for it. I I ordered that card, the AMD Ryzen 9 9950X, and then I got a new motherboard that's made by, it's gosh, I know the brand in my head. I probably just need to look it up. It's on the tip of my brain right now. Like I know what it is. Gigabyte is what it is. Gigabyte is the brand. The one thing I didn't do was MSI, because I had a bad experience with an MSI motherboard, and my friend was telling me, yeah, MSI, that's the one thing they don't do well is motherboards. So, yeah. So anyway, I got the Gigabyte motherboard with Wi-Fi 7. It's able to do Wi-Fi 7, and then 64 gigs of DDR5 RAM, which thankfully is only requires, I mean, it's two 32 gig sticks, so it's just doing the dual channel, not taking up all 4 slots. So theoretically in the future I could upgrade to 128 gigs of RAM if I really wanted to. And my motherboard my motherboard supports up to 256 gigs. So it's insane. But you know, I'm sticking to 64. I'm not going any higher. I don't need that much. I mean, 64 is more than enough. So anyway, and then I got a new CPU fan, because the one I have right now is one I've been using since 2016, my original build. And then yeah, so that was all the stuff I had to do. I didn't have to get a new power supply, because the one I have is 750 watts and it's still enough to power everything with still some headroom. So I'm good on that front. My friend basically told me that when I upgrade my graphics card, I will probably have to get a bigger CPU, or I mean a bigger power supply. But for the time being, what I have is more than sufficient for what I need. And same power supply I've had since 2016. So I've literally had it for 9 years, over 9 years, and it's still working great. Keeping my hard drives, both my standard HDD and my original SATA SSD and my NVMe SSD. And I believe I should have additional slots available for another NVMe if I wanted to get one. I'm just not doing that right now, because it's like I could use it, but I don't need it. And since I'm already spending a pretty good amount on other upgrades, it's like, yeah, I probably just need to clear up some space on my hard drives and call it good, you know. But anyway, so yeah, my parts are going to start coming in tomorrow, and it should be Monday when I get my CPU. And that's the last thing that's supposed to be coming in. God willing, maybe it'll be here earlier, but I'm not expecting it to. It's expected on Monday, and so as long as everything goes smoothly, I should be getting it by Monday, which would enable me to get everything reconfigured, rebuilt. I'll definitely rearrange my cables, because I didn't do a good job the last time I modified my build when I put in the new motherboard, and so I could have better cable management than what I have right now. Get everything cleaned out and pretty. I made sure this time I went for no RGB stuff on anything, because the main reason why I don't like it, like I like it when you're just looking at it, but the way that my PC is set up is that the glass side where you can see everything, it is facing towards my side of the bed, and so like in the middle of the night it can bother me. I mean, I always just keep like a pillow propped up against it to keep it from bothering me, but like especially if I have to render the podcast or whatever overnight, because like it's too late for me to finish it before I go to bed, then I have to keep my computer on when I go to bed. But theoretically, with the better CPU, it should render a lot faster too, because that's video rendering is a CPU intensive function. But yeah, so all that being said, I should have a pretty significant boost to performance with all of that. just because so many games, especially the open world ones, are very CPU heavy, and that's really the big bottleneck for these games. So it should make a nice difference, and I should see some significant gains, including in Monster Hunter Wilds, because that is a very CPU heavy game. The same buddy I've been talking about, Zach, was telling me that with like he's been playing Monster Hunter Wilds. Funny enough, he said he was actually doing it with a little bit with one of these little 8-bit DOE Switch controllers. He was playing it a little bit that way. But he said that basically the way the game is working is that it's constantly rendering all of the open world stuff for the monsters, and that's why it's so incredibly demanding. It's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not efficient like it should be. There are many games that are much more efficient than that. But anyway, so I mean, he said with his performance, he's getting around 90 frames per second, pretty average, which is, I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah.
Mostly, I like the biggest thing with that game, and I'll talk a little more about it later, but the biggest thing with that game for me is that it's not using up much of any of my VRAM. Like, I think even if I max out all the visual settings, I'm using like maybe 5 gigs of VRAM. It's using very little, and yet it runs horribly. And I mean, obviously my CPU is old. It's pretty old. I mean, it was top of the line at the time, and for the motherboard that I currently have, it's pretty much the best I could get. But yeah. So I think that's pretty much. Oh yeah, the one last thing I wanted to mention is that I was very pleasantly surprised to see that in addition to my bonus coming through this morning, our tax return came through much faster than last year. Most years it's like 3-4 weeks at the most. Last year it took over 2 months to get our tax return, and this year it took about 2 weeks. So,
wow.
Any fears that people have about taxes taking longer because of all the people who got fired from the IRS, I don't think you need to worry about that. I think they just maybe got a little more efficient. And like I said, it's not like this was something that has happened every year, because it definitely hasn't, but last year was horrible how long it took. That was just ridiculous. The fact that I filed at the beginning of February and it wasn't until sometime in April that I finally got my tax return. It was ridiculous. And I was worried that it just wasn't coming through at all. And yeah, anyway. So that was good news, and it was a very welcome surprise this morning to wake up and find that, because I knew the bonus was coming through this morning, but I was not expecting the tax return to come through already. So that also made it easier. I felt less guilty about spending my entire bonus on these new PC parts. And I told my wife this evening. She's like, "Oh, okay." It's like, "Oh, I love you." Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to say about my week.
Okay, a couple questions I actually have. So with replacing the motherboard, is there anything special you need to do? I mean, as far as when you put all the parts back in, I guess primarily the main storage drive, is there any special calibration or anything like that, or anything you need to set up, or is it pretty much just everything's left off from where you were before?
It's just unplugging cables from the original motherboard and plugging them in with the new one.
Oh.
I mean, like, I can't even remember how much of those plug into the motherboard versus the power supply. I mean, there is both. It's just it's been 6 years since the last time I did that. Well, I guess technically it hasn't been that long, because I took my old PC parts to build a secondary PC in 2021. But anyway, yeah, it's basically just that. I mean, I have to unscrew stuff, unplug stuff, and then put the new motherboard in, screw it in, plug in all the cables, and seat the like the GPU and sound card and things like that. So It's not overly complicated. It's mostly just some of like the smaller things that plug into the motherboard that are a little more annoying, particularly the ones for the power button and the reset button.
Oh,
Because they're
yes.
just like these little teeny tiny things, and you have to get them on a specific thread, and if you mess it up, then you have to open it back up and try again and make sure you get it on just the right spot, and it's annoying. That's the one thing that I mean, like, that is the one and only thing about building a PC that I hated. But I'll try doing it in a very well lit area, and then hopefully it won't be as much of an issue this time around. And I've done it a couple times, so it's not that big of a deal. It's not like I'm building completely from scratch. It's just having to rearrange some stuff. So.
And I couldn't really tell from the picture you sent. What is the cooler that you bought for the CPU?
Let's see here. I can't remember the brand. It was just one that was recommended to me. Let me look it up real quick. It is Thermalright Peerless Assassin 120 SE CPU cooler. It's got 6 heat. Sorry, let me find the actual page here. 6 heat pipes, AGHP technology, dual 120 millimeter power, PWM fans, 1550 RPM speed. So, but yeah, that was what my friend Zach recommended to me for being able to cool my CPU, because I've just been using like a really basic one that I've had, like I said, for my original build, which is for an old i5 6500K, I think is what it was. So it's an old. I mean, I don't even know what year that was manufactured, but it was. I mean, I think it was old in 2016 when I got the computer. So, yeah, it's old. But I guess one last thing I want to mention is that with this, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my old parts, because there's a few different things I could potentially do. One is basically taking my existing motherboard and CPU, putting it into our current secondary computer, and then taking out the old motherboard and CPU and RAM from that. And then either I could use it to build a smaller PC that could be my travel PC that's basically just for really basic functionality. Wouldn't even necessarily have to have a GPU, because it does have integrated graphics. And if I'm not using it for gaming, it's really not essential to have a GPU. The other idea is that I keep that computer the way it is, continue to have it just as bare bones, doing what it needs to do, except that I would take the GTX 980 out of that, put it on my existing motherboard in a new build that would be a more compact thing that would be for traveling, and potentially just keep it as like a living room PC that could be used for games in the living room and like media center, that sort of thing. But I don't really know what I'm doing yet, because like the ideal would be, I would love to just get a laptop that I could use, because that just has everything already put together. It's simple. I don't have to worry about buying more parts, but that would definitely be more expensive than just getting a case and a power supply, and I wouldn't even need a fan, because I already have a fan. So it would basically just be case, power supply, hard drive, and that might be about it. Because depending on where I put it would determine whether or not I need to buy like a sound card and stuff, because more likely than not the sound card would be in the more powerful computer, because I have a sound card in that PC right now, but it doesn't absolutely need one because it's barely being used. And if I could just put that sound card into the new build, it would work great. And so it's just, I honestly don't know. I'm looking at different options. I'm thinking through different things, and I don't know anything about what size case I would need in order to be able to properly accommodate my existing motherboard and all the parts that are needed, while not being a full-size case, because I don't want a full-size case, because that completely defeats the purpose. I want to have something that I can travel with, and I don't want to bring a full tower with me, because if I was going to bring a full tower with me, I would just bring my main computer. But I want to have something that is not that. And so I'm really undecided on what exactly I want to do with all this, and I'm thinking through different options. I know that you have built like a more compact mini PC, or whatever you were calling it. So I definitely have to pick your brain on what type of case you used, and of course, I guess, does it accommodate a standard size motherboard, or does it have to use a smaller one?
This one, I think you kind of have to use a smaller motherboard.
Okay.
I know the one I have is, I think the smallest one's mini ITX. I think it's
Right.
mini ITX. So I
Yeah.
think I have a mini ITX, but it can fit a micro ATX, I think, which is like the next smallest motherboard. So I don't think it can. I don't think it can fit a full ATX one. So yeah, you would probably have to get like a smaller motherboard.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid all that, because I guess the main thing is like my ideal would be able to use all of my existing parts, because like my old motherboard and CPU, they're not worth jack. They're not worth anything. I can't sell them for anything. I could probably sell my existing i9 with the motherboard and the 64 gigs of RAM. I probably could sell those, but I'd rather make practical use out of them. And, I'd like to get my kids eventually into PC gaming, and having something like that that's a decently powerful machine that could, do at least a lot of the kind of stuff they would want to play would be great. So it's just like, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. I think part of it is going to depend on whether or not I can find a laptop that I can get a good deal on. That's really what it comes down to. If I can find that, then I'll figure something out. I'm just not sure yet. It's not a priority though right now, because right now the main priority is getting my PC updated, hopefully completely before Extra Life, so that I have a chance to test everything out, and we'll have it ready to go for my stream. And then after that, I can figure out what I'm doing with secondary PC and all of that. So yeah, because I doubt I'm going to have enough time to get my existing motherboard into the old shell if I decided to do that. Because while, yeah, that would certainly probably help with the streaming process and everything, it's also just one more thing to do, and I just have already a packed week next week. So I'm not going to bother. I'll do what I did last time, just with an upgraded PC. So yeah, that's it.
Very good.
All right. Let me just bring up Stream Deck real quick. Okay. Give it to me. What have you been playing this week?
All right, so I'm gonna knock this one out of the way, and I don't have a recording for this, but I played a little bit more Transformers Devastation, primarily just to see if that would be something I would be interested in playing. I don't think so right now, just because I'm still not comfortable with the right bumper being both the dodge and the transform, especially since you have to actually hold it down to transform. Right, and it's just a bit too complicated for me to, or at least right now, to just get used to that. So
well,
I don't think
couldn't you set one of them to the back buttons?
I'm not certain. I'd have to actually have to see,
because
if
I mean,
that's a
I
possibility.
would think you should be able to. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, yeah. It's just because both the button functions for both actions. It's just like hard to like get used to. Like if I went to transform, I have to hold it down. If I want to actually just dodge, just regularly tap it.
Yeah.
So it's just been comfortable. So I might come back later, but I don't think so right now. But what I was playing mostly, or at least until I finished it, was more Gestalt, Steam, and Cinder. And overall, I will say that this has been a fun game. It's definitely been a good Metroidvania. And apart from the problem I had with the dodge mechanic, I thought eventually the dodge mechanic would be something I could upgrade, where maybe I could get 2 dodges instead of just having to dodge once, let it reload before I can dodge again. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but despite that, I still think the game was pretty fun. And when I beat the game, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but when the game ended, I thought, huh, I don't know what people were so upset about, saying that the ending was bad and that it was open ended, because I was expecting something sort of like what happened at the end of Katana Zero, where that game had a completely cliffhanger ending. But when I finished the game, I thought, huh, that's not so bad. It's a bit open ended, but it still felt like it was an ending. Then there was a post-credit scene, and then I understood exactly what people meant and why they were so frustrated with what it meant, because yeah, I can understand that. But I think discarding that, the game still is fun to play. I do like. I definitely enjoy as I played more. I definitely enjoyed more of the attack to refill your ammo, and I do appreciate the fact that you can definitely upgrade your ammo, or at least the capacity. So you can fire off more shots. You can still use more special attacks, and not necessarily have to just like do it once or twice, and then that's all you can do for the moment. I will also say that the later bosses, if you've been trying to upgrade all your stuff and get more skills, the later bosses felt so much easier than the earlier bosses just because you felt so powerful. I mean, of course, you could still get killed, but I didn't feel threatened or feel like I was ever in any serious danger as if though it were earlier in the game, when I only probably had fewer heals and maybe only a couple different abilities. So the bosses, I feel like, definitely were a whole lot easier. Even the end boss, and honestly, his attacks were pretty simplistic, and I was a bit surprised that there wasn't even like a second phase. Which this isn't the final boss here, because I don't want to spoil the end boss, because that would really technically spoil the whole plot. But this next to end boss. But and actually, this boss here that you're seeing, I would say is actually more difficult than the final boss. But yeah, so like it wasn't too bad. But overall, this definitely was a good game, and I'm glad that I played it. So next thing I did, and this one was partially to test the performance of the GPU, and I played some more Final Fantasy VII Remake, and definitely got a whole lot better performance. And in fact, I feel like maybe I could try uncapping the frame rate, because I am getting 90 locked right now,
Nice.
which I feel like is a given for what it is. But I mean, I feel like I should be able to get more, like maybe closer to 100. Maybe I could see if I could get 110 plus. I don't know, but it's definitely getting 90 locked with slight dips here and there if a new area is loading. But if it's not loading, then it's pretty much staying at 90. So I'm definitely pleased with that. And I made it up to the wall market. That's pretty much where I stopped right now, but I'm definitely still enjoying the game, and I do feel like now that I've gotten over, I guess, the slight hurdle of the dips that I was getting before. It's definitely much. I think I definitely will get back into playing this more frequently. The boss fight with Rude, I was not expecting some of his attacks, and I feel like the problem I had with part of the fight was the fact that I keep wanting to dodge like it's any game like Dark Souls or even Kingdom Hearts for that matter, where you have a more powerful dodge mechanic, and also I guess more iframes, especially when he keeps trying to put Aerith to sleep, and I'm keep trying to run away from those attacks. And when he keeps trying to grab Cloud as well, I'm trying to run from him, but I just can't get enough distance from him for that. But he almost got me a couple times, but I managed to get through that fight alive in one piece, even if I had to use a couple of Phoenix Downs. But yeah, definitely having a good time with this game, and I am definitely enjoying the performance boost that I'm getting from the graphics card. And then the next game that I played, which is again just to test out the GPU, was Superland. Now, before I mentioned that I was only getting 60 with some inconsistent dips here and there, this one I was able to get 90 because, again, I wasn't certain how it was going to perform. And also, I boosted the graphics. I think I boosted the textures up to high, whereas before they were, I think, set to low or something like that. And it didn't really seem to make a difference as far as any dips, so I was definitely satisfied with that. Didn't really play too much of it, partially because I couldn't remember what I was even doing in the first place. But yeah, definitely pleased with the results there. Then a new game that I'm playing that I'm trying to get into, or at least I want to try to get into, was a game called Wall World. And it's a roguelite where you essentially are just mining different caves and trying to explore while also periodically being attacked by different creatures. And supposedly this wall is endless. There's no top and there's no bottom based on, I guess, the in-game lore. It's pretty simplistic in what you're supposed to do. And because of that, I feel like until you actually get enough currency to upgrade your some of your components that you actually get to keep, like your vacuum, and also upgrading your robo spider transport, it can get very monotonous to the point that you almost want to stop. And until you actually get to the point where you can actually upgrade stuff to the point that actually feels like there's something good, it is a bit of a slog. But I do feel like I'm starting to get to the point where I am getting over that hill, so it's starting to become more enjoyable again. Because again, it's pretty much simple. You go into a cave, you mine it, trying to get minerals to upgrade the stuff for that run. But then also for every block that you destroy, you gain some currency for that. And you're constantly doing that as you explore each mine. And occasionally you might even find different upgrades, both for your suit, so you can, be more efficient with your mining, move faster in the mines, or you might even find some weapons for your robo spider, or even different other types of upgrades like towers that can help shoot projectiles at enemies that are coming near you, or just getting some robots that can heal you, stuff like that. So it's probably something that I might keep on playing, because I'm making progress now that I've upgraded some more stuff, but at the same time, it's probably something I might be putting up and down here and there. And then the last game I played, and this one was something that I just thought maybe I'll come back to it again just to see if the game works this time, and that's The Last Case of Benedict Fox. And while my performance is much better than when it was before, when I was getting a very inconsistent 60, it's still inexcusable. I mean, the performance, you probably won't be able to notice this because of the fact that the recording is in 60 FPS, but it jumps from 120 down to 77. And it's doing it very frequently too, I might add, which when the times when it does sudden drops, it's very noticeable, and it feels like there's a bit of lag going on, which is horrendous. And I mean, the fact that this game, I thought even perhaps maybe I could brute force the game to running properly, but apparently you can't even do that because of the fact that the game suffers from memory leaks, and this is something that the devs never fixed. And to top it all off, I actually saw a community post for the game, and essentially the devs, it seems like they've pretty much just given up on updating the game, and they're working on a new game, which I'm thinking, why are you leaving the game like this? I mean, and the thing is, some people might not care for the game because mechanics wise, some of the features might not be to everyone's taste. Because I do think that the dodge mechanic being stuck with the right joystick feels weird to dodge in a Metroidvania. So I feel like something like that, I can understand people not enjoying that. But I feel like there could be a good game here, but the performance is what just kills it completely. So it's very disappointing to see, because I thought this could be good. I feel like definitely after this, I will never touch this game again because of the fact that you could probably be running an RTX, whatever they call it in the future, like a 10,090 Super TI, which has 128 gigs of VRAM, and the game still will probably be a stuttery mess just because of just because of those memory leaks and how unoptimized it is. So I'm never gonna touch this game again. And yeah, this is definitely one of those games where if you called that a game your nemesis, this would be that game for me. But yeah, that is everything that I have played this past week.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to go back to Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I'm very glad that you're getting better performance on this one, of course. I have to ask, is the Wall Market theme, does it get stuck in your head as much as it did for me?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't gotten too far into it. Like, I essentially stopped right as you get in there, right after you
Gotcha. Okay.
right after you see Tifa and you're about to enter there.
Gotcha.
So like I stopped for the moment and just like paused there and haven't picked it up yet. So I haven't gotten it caught in my head yet.
It's great. It's great music. But yeah, fantastic. Okay. Well, good stuff. Yeah, looking at Wall World, I actually look at that. It kind of gives me like the mining aspects give me SteamWorld Dig vibes, and I mean, of course, the fact that it's a roguelike, that it's not the same, but I don't know. It looks interesting. I might check that out at some point. I thought that looked kind of interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have in terms of thoughts on those things. So. All right. Well, let me start off by getting the things that I played just a tiny bit of out of the way. I will say, first of all, and I don't have any new footage. This is just going to be old footage. Monster Hunter Wilds. So I wanted to try out, see, you know, if I switched over to just dual channel RAM, whether or not that would help the performance. You know, just doing the 32 instead of the 64. And it made zero difference. Made absolutely no difference. It didn't perform any better or worse. So clearly it's not using any of the RAM. And I mean, my motherboard does support that kind of RAM. It didn't make any difference whatsoever. So yeah, it's a CPU bottleneck for sure. That is my problem, which will probably be fixed. I don't know how much it'll make a difference in this game. But theoretically, it should make a pretty significant difference having that. A side note, just thinking of, you know, the last time I upgraded my CPU, one of the things that had motivated me to do that was when I was playing Assassin's Creed Origins, because of the CPU issues on my old one, there would be times where characters would load in and they would have no textures on them. So it would just, I mean, it would just be like flat, like paper-like textures on them on my old i5. And I mean, once I upgraded to the i9, I didn't have that issue anymore, and the game looked and ran great. But yeah, it was just, it's what it kind of reminds me of. Of course, that the weird like flat polygonal face thing that, you know, I'm sure you've seen pictures of from Wilds. That did happen to me once for a couple seconds, which was on Wilds, and it was funny when it happened. But yeah, hopefully my fixes or my improved specs that will be happening once I get all of my parts in will make a big difference on that front. So but then something that I played that I've literally never played before, but mostly just because my oldest son wanted to play, and that's Minecraft. And we did some co-op on the Switch. One thing that's interesting about this is, you know, I was curious about, like, I've been going back and forth on whether to get this game on PC or Switch, because, you know, I figured, okay, we'll get it on PC and it's gonna look and run better and everything. But the problem is PC does not natively have co-op, local co-op at all. Only the console versions have that. And there is a way to do it, but it's a little bit complicated, and basically the game has, I mean, the PC has to render the game twice in order to be able to do that. And even though, yeah, my computer could probably do that, I'm just like, it just seems like it's more of a hassle than it's worth, especially because of the fact that I know my son is going to want to play, and I'd really rather just, I don't know, I mean, we already had the ability to play it on the Switch because since my Nintendo online account stuff is shared with my nephews, rather, you know, my game library, when they wanted Minecraft after their parents bought my V2 Switch a couple years ago, they wanted to get it digitally, and so they gave me money and I paid for it on my account. And so basically that's how we've been able to play Minecraft is using that copy that I purchased on my account. And I figured, you know, they got an Xbox Series S pretty recently, so they've been playing that more. But anyway, so with Minecraft, it actually performs pretty well on the Switch. I think it may I may be wrong on this. And it may just be because I've watched some other games that run really, really poorly lately, and so then it looks like 60 to me, but it looks like it's actually running at 60, even with multiplayer. So I have a feeling I'm wrong on that, and that it probably actually is only 30, but like I said, it may just be because I saw some gameplay of other games recently that were really horrible, and so it just looks smooth compared to those. Like I saw some gameplay of Dark Souls 2 on consoles, and oh my goodness, that was like in the 20s. It was horrible. Like I couldn't imagine how you could possibly play it like that, especially because, you know, I'm playing it locked at 60 on the Steam Deck. But anyway, Minecraft. So we just did creative mode because my son's not really interested in doing survival, at least not with me. Mostly because before this, I literally never played. And I could see playing it how it could potentially be addictive. Like, definitely I could see it. Now, I don't think that this is something I will play apart from what I'm playing with my son or my sons. Well, any of my kids, really. But I could definitely see it being something that if I was to actually, like, really just sit down and play for a while, I probably could get hooked on it. I could see that happening. I'm just mostly not super interested in that, but I'll play with my son, and really both of my boys kind of want to play it with me, and I'm not sure about my daughter, whether or not she's as interested in it, but either way, I mean, you know, it's a potential option. I did end up buying a physical copy that I'm just waiting for it to arrive, and that way we don't have to use the digital version that belongs to my nephews, really. So then, that way we don't have to worry about, like, if they want to play on the Switch too, then they can play on their Switch, their digital version, and we'll just play our physical version, and we'll be good. But the good thing is that, like, I still have a Microsoft account back from, I think probably when I did the original Halo on PC, I had gotten a Games for Windows Live account. That was either original Halo or Halo 2. It was probably Halo 2, now that I think about it. But anyway, so I already had, you know, I have a Microsoft account through that. They don't have any of my information because I've never purchased anything through them, but, you know, can get achievements and, you know, save transfers and all that. I don't have to pay for online, so anyway. So yeah, Minecraft. Interesting playing that, for sure, after all these years. And then I did I played some Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, which I don't have any footage here because I forgot to record anything. But I played that with my daughter. She wanted to play that, so we did a couple Grand Prix, and that was really all we did. But, you know, good stuff, still good stuff. And then my middle son wanted to play Lego City Undercover co-op, so we booted that up. And the thing is that my wife had already played a bunch of this on PC, because I mean, I originally just played it on the Wii U, of course, and then when it came to Switch and PC and everything else, I grabbed it both on Switch and PC. And so my wife had played, and she'd gotten 100% on everything, but she didn't get all the achievements. And so while I was playing with my son, I'm like, you know, there's like 5 or 6 achievements. None of them are difficult to do. I'm just going to do it. So I, you know, spent like, I mean, I think I got 1 or 2 while I was playing with him co-op, and we really just did one of the story missions. And then after he and the others went to bed, I just knocked out the remaining achievements. Took me like half an hour, and so we have all the achievements now on the game as well. But I don't have any footage recorded for that because I just forgot to record anything. So, but the game that I spent basically the entire rest of my time playing was Dark Souls 2. So I'm not, at least right now, with before post adding all the video clips and everything, I'm not going to include all the clips as I'm talking about this, just because there's too many. And I didn't have time to create a separate scene for each one so that I could add each video. It just wasn't worth the trouble. So, anyway, all the videos will be included in the final version. So I fought a total of 10 bosses, and I beat 8 of those. So I'll just start from the beginning here. And the next boss I encountered was the Pursuer, which there is a very, very easy cheese method for this one. And it's not a cheese method like exploiting the system. It's more like utilizing what the game provides you. And so if you can parry his first attack, there's ballistas in the environment that you can use on him in this stage. And so if you manage to parry him, then he's stunned long enough that you can run over to the ballista, you shoot him twice with it, and he's dead. So it literally took 30 seconds to finish the boss fight once I actually figured out the parrying. Now, I will say that I've never been good at parrying in Dark Souls at all. But then I finally, I can't remember if it was just I had heard this, or I saw or read or heard it from the cheat that that the buckler, it has a much wider parry window and is way easier to parry with. And so, and of course, I've seen the buckler in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 and probably Elden Ring. And I just, I'd never used it because I hated trying to parry. I was terrible at it. But because of the fact that I was having issues getting through the boss fight, or pairing with anything else and stuff, I just was like, okay, I want to try to do this. I grabbed the buckler, I started using it. It made parrying way easier, and of course it made the fight against the Pursuer, at least as long as he used the right attack, pretty easy. It was pretty easy to parry his attack, and then of course, using the ballista, the fact that it did almost his entire health bar in one hit, and then, the remainder with the second hit, was pretty fantastic. But what's kind of funny about this, and I'll include some clips of it here. The thing about the Pursuer is that while initially you have the boss fight against him, the Pursuer shows up like a bunch of times, just in random places as you're going through the rest of the game. And thankfully, in addition to the parrying still being just as easy, you can't riposte, so you can parry him, but then he's just stunned long enough that you can get a few hits in. But he's easy to parry with his main attack, at least. But his other attacks, if you know where to move, it's actually, especially if you move around his left side, his shield side, if you move around that, it's pretty easy to avoid most of his attacks. And then you can go behind him, hit him a few times, and just rinse and repeat, parry when you're able to. And so it's, I've encountered him probably at least 4 times, maybe 5 times that I've been playing the game, and I know that eventually there's like 2 of them at once, but yeah. And while I certainly have died, particularly like the first time I encountered him after fighting him in the boss fight, the rest of the times I usually can beat him on my first try, because he's not particularly difficult if you can parry his attacks and avoid the ones that are either impossible or harder to parry. So yeah, Pursuer, pretty easy to parry, and the other thing I can tell myself is that even though I use the game's version of a cheese that's built into the arena intentionally, I think that they did that because then basically any future time you encounter him, you don't have that option, and so they're like, we'll give you this one, and then the rest of them you have to actually learn how to kill him. So yeah. But let's see here. Go through my list here. The next boss I fought was the Dragon Rider, and there is a cheese for this one. I didn't use it. Basically, it's the area that you go into. It has like these switches that you pull, which raise up rings to the arena where the Dragon Rider is. But if you don't raise those rings, then you can very easily, when you walk into the arena, if you stand in the right spot, relatively speaking, he'll just charge himself right off the edge and he'll die. Now, I didn't do that because, for one, I forgot that was a cheese option for this fight, and I'd already raised the rings, and so there was nothing I could do about that. But also, I just didn't really feel like it was necessary. I figured it wouldn't be too bad to kill him. And he still took me a handful of tries. I think he probably took me like 3 or 4 tries. But honestly, the hardest thing about this wasn't the fight against him itself. It's all the enemies before him. And most of these knights that you deal with, I think they're just called ancient knights, I want to say, but I might be remembering wrong. It's something along those lines. Most of them are not difficult to deal with. The problem is that if you just happen to not dodge correctly or whatever, they do hit really hard. And so they're just annoying enough. And there's a lot of them in between it, of course. Because of the fact that I was part of the Champions Covenant, which I mentioned to you, enemies still respawn all the time, like you normally get in Dark Souls. And so I'm just having to deal. I mean, it's a long trek from the bonfire to this guy, and so it was just getting super annoying. And but anyway, so it took me like 3-4 tries, and then I beat him. And he's really not a hard boss at all. It's mostly just getting to him is the hardest part. After that, it's really not terribly bad as long as you strafe around him enough. It's pretty easy to get in some hits. And I know eventually there's going to be 2 of them together that I'll have to fight, but I don't think I'm anywhere near there. And I think that this game has, like, including the DLC bosses, it's like 40 some odd bosses. It's a lot more than, I think it's about double the amount that was in Dark Souls Remastered with all of the DLC bosses included. So it's a lot. But anyway, so beat him. And then I went on to the Old Dragon Slayer. So the Old Dragon Slayer, and like I said, I'll include that footage in the final version of this. It's Ornstein. I mean, it's literally Ornstein with a couple of additional attacks that were basically Smaug's attacks, or actually, I guess technically it's like some of Ornstein's regular attacks and then some of Super Ornstein's attacks. And he's not as fast as he was in Dark Souls 1. The arena is definitely smaller. The pillars do not shield you at all. He just completely decimates them. He didn't take me a ton of tries. It was once again an issue more than anything just getting to him that was annoying. Because you go through a completely different set of enemies to get to him. Or, well, you go through most of the same knights, and then you have like one extra knight, one of the Haida knights, which are like these white knights. And there's one with a spear that's super annoying to deal with. I mean, at least until I figured out that I could strafe around his back pretty easily, and then he wasn't as bad. But I guess I should back up a little bit. So before I actually went in here, like I had watched some of a Fighting Cowboys walkthrough and that sort of thing, and I noticed it's like, okay, why is it that no summons are showing up for me? Why are no NPC summons showing up for me, even when I'm human? And I couldn't figure out what it was, and then I realized it's because of the Covenant that I'm in. So the Covenant makes it so that enemies respawn, but it also makes it that you can't summon NPCs. So it's kind of, I mean, for these sort of things that are annoying about, you know, the enemies being in the way all the time, it's like, it's great when you're wanting to grind, but it's not so great when you're just wanting to get to the boss. And so from that standpoint, it's like, okay, not having enemies respawn all the time could be really useful, but they were always respawning for me. I couldn't see any NPCs. I couldn't figure out why. And then when I figured this out, I abandoned the Covenant, and I was able to actually summon someone to help me out with getting up to Ornstein. And that was just, I needed that help because I was just like, I was getting, like, I could get past most of the enemies. It really wasn't until that spear guy at the end there that was just pissing me off, that I was having issues. And I will say, the dragon that's right before you go into Ornstein's arena, I just took him out with arrows from afar because although the first time I tried to do this, I got him down to, like, I just needed to hit him one more time and I was out of arrows. And I tried going up there to see if I could take him out that way, but then I had to deal with the spear guy and he killed me, and then I had to do it over again, and it was like, ugh. But yeah. So anyway, took down Ornstein, 1.5 or whatever you want to call him, the less shiny version of Ornstein. And then went into the next area. I can't even remember what the name of it is. I think it's Hollow Bastille or something Bastille, Royal Bastille. I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember the names of the places. I'm still learning names of different things. But anyway, this took me in like a back way into an area that I previously had gone to right after beating the Pursuer, because when you beat the Pursuer, there's a nest that you can go to, and then if you walk up to it, then you get carried off to a bonfire at that location that has a couple treasure chests and stuff. But when you go past a certain point, like just shortly after the bonfire, you can't get back to that bonfire. And I couldn't find another bonfire, and so like I kind of had a system. I was like, okay, I got these enemies, I know what I'm doing here, but I kept getting killed, and then I wouldn't be able to get back to the bonfire after picking up my souls or whatever. And so I lost a bunch of souls from that, and then I went back and looked at Fighting Cowboys walkthrough and found out, oh, I could go this opposite, a different direction to get to this area where I ultimately fought the Dragon Rider and Ornstein and all that. So then, let's see here. So this next area I fought the Flexile Sentry. Oh yeah, it was something Wharf. That was the next area. I can't remember the name of it. It's some wharf, and it's like a very dark area with like a ship and stuff, and like these creepy monsters that kind of remind me of small versions of the monster from Cloverfield. And yeah, and I didn't realize until I'd gone through quite a bit that I could light all the different torches around the area to light things up. And so when I found out that, I was like, oh, that will be super helpful. And so I did that. And yeah, went there and fought the Flexile Sentry in the boat. I do want to note real quickly, with the after I found myself able to summon NPCs, I started doing it all the time, because more than anything, just because I was tired of dealing with all the enemies in between, just because of the fact that there's so many more of them, and it's like sometimes they're not too hard to deal with, but then there's other times where they're just super annoying, and when you're having to run back to the boss and just deal with all these enemies in between, having the NPC to help was just nice. So I ended up using the NPCs. I think I've used them in most of the boss fights. There's only been like one or two where, well, I would say I think that there may have only been one time where I didn't deal most of the damage, or rather where I didn't finish off the boss. And every time I've gone into a fight, I've always been the one dealing the most damage. So at least there's that. You know, I'm still dealing most of the damage. Most of the time the NPCs are just distracting the boss. So that helps. So took out the Flexel Sentry, then went on into the Bastille area, whatever it was called, and took down the Ruined Sentinels, which weren't terrible. I think it took me 2 or 3 tries for that one. And then continued from there into another area that I can't remember the name of that was connected to that Bastille area or whatever. And fought the Lost Sinner. And, you know, I beat him. Took, I think, 3 or 4 tries, something like that. It was very dark in the arena, but it wasn't too terrible of a fight. Most of his attacks weren't overly hard to dodge, and I did have, you know, NPCs distracting him a bit. That helped too, but I'm pretty sure that the time that I beat him, he had killed the NPCs quite a while before I actually took him down. So anyway, it doesn't really matter. You'll see in the footage when I put it in the video. So then I decided, because I just happened to have the souls at the time, I went and bought the cat ring that gives you damage or fall damage protection. Like, it doesn't completely protect you, but it does give you a lot more leeway on that front. So that I could get down that well in Majula, and then I went and fought the Royal Rat Vanguard in that area and beat that after, I think it took several tries, but it was mostly just because it took me a while to figure out the right way to avoid getting petrified or cursed, whatever it was. I can't remember. I think it was petrified. Yeah, I was getting petrified by those rats. And then, of course, figuring out where the actual boss was amongst all the rats when that popped up. And then the 2 bosses that I attempted but was not able to beat, one of those was the Rotten, which is in basically after you finish the rat area, as you go further down, like at near the bottom, you'll come into like a cave that has a bunch of statues that shoot poison at you and stuff, which is super annoying. And I fought the Rotten several times, and I managed to get... There was I think a couple times where I got him really close, but I did not beat him. And unfortunately, I just ran out of healing items. I ran out of the human effigies, so I couldn't, you know, restore, or undead effigy or whatever it's called that, you know, turns you back to human. And so I stopped trying for a while, and I realized that I was probably there earlier than I should have been anyway. At least technically. So then I went back to the Bastille area or whatever it was, and went to fight the Belfry Gargoyles. And I did manage to, I think a couple of times I got it down to just 1 gargoyle left, and he was pretty close to dying, but then I got killed in both of those times that I made it that far, and I haven't gone back and tried again since. But final thing I want to note regarding how I've been playing is that in most of the game I've been using primarily club, because since Dark Souls 3, I found that the club is actually a fun weapon to use. It scales with strength, and it's lightweight, so it's easy to get in more hits. and it works well against a lot of different enemies, especially against skeletons, even though I haven't encountered a lot of skeletons in Dark Souls 2 yet. But then you're going to like this one. The other weapon that I've been using for a while as my secondary is the Greatsword. And partially it's because I haven't gotten the Zweihander yet. The Zweihander, I think, is actually pretty late in the game that I can actually get that, which is a shame.
Weird.
Yeah, it's in one of the late game areas where I can actually get them. And apparently it's a pretty common drop, too, from particular enemies. But, yeah, I haven't been able to get the Zweihander yet. And the Greatsword, it's like, I always liked the idea of using it, but I just couldn't quite figure it out in Dark Souls 3, particularly because I was so used to how the Zweihander handled. And, yeah, it handles very different. I like the weapon definitely better in this game than I liked it in Dark Souls 3. However, the one thing I really hate about it is that the targeting with it is really wonky sometimes. Because there will be times where, like, I'm facing the enemy. I'm literally facing the enemy. I'm targeting them. I try doing my R2 attack, and it goes off to the side. It's like, why? Why are you going off to the side? It's supposed to be overhead swing, and then you press it again, and it pulls it back up, and it's great. It's like, it's great when it works. But if you swing the wrong direction, it's like, that's a bunch of lost stamina and a wasted hit. In fact, 2 wasted hits, basically, because I can't do the follow-up attack with that. So, yeah, I like the sword a lot. I just don't like the fact that the targeting is so weird on it, and I don't understand it. I don't understand why it does that. It's possible it's just me, but it's like, I'm serious. There are times I'm looking at the enemy. I have them targeted, and then the sword swings sideways instead of swing. It's like, why are you doing this? Why? And I'm sure that I'm not the only person who's experienced this, but I haven't looked it up. So, okay. That should be everything I have to say about Dark Souls 2. I will say that overall, I'm enjoying the game. It's something that I just keep wanting to play. I know there's 0 chance that I'll be done with it before Extra Life, so I will definitely be playing it some during Extra Life among multiple other games. And yeah, that's what I have to say. I believe everything.
Cool. So I've got a couple Dark Souls 2 questions. Actually, well, this one's really more so just a comment. I did not know about the, I guess, cheese method with the Pursuer, at least the first Pursuer boss fight. And that's very funny that you could do that. And was that something that you saw online after facing the Pursuer, or was that just like something?
I had seen it previously. I think it was probably first time that you remember that video I shared with you, the bottom gear, the Dark Souls special with the 3 top gear guys. I'm pretty sure that was the first time I saw it, and then I had probably also, I mean, I definitely saw it in Fightin' Cowboy's walkthrough, because I'm using Fightin' Cowboy more than anything for if I'm either stuck, or I mean, like, I don't know where to go, or if I just want to go back and pick up any items I missed, or and find secret doors and that sort of thing. So,
and regarding the Champion's Covenant, if you leave the Covenant and then say you attack all the enemies in the area to the point that they don't respawn, if you join the Covenant again, can the enemies respawn again? Or
I'm not sure, but I think so. And that's something that I'm basically waiting to test until I get to a point that if I get to a point that I want to grind. That probably won't happen, especially because I'm at like level 88 right now. And I have a lot of the game left. So, I mean, I don't know how I managed to get such high level with so much left in the game. I mean, I was definitely ahead on both Dark Souls Remastered when I was playing that on the Switch, and on Elden Ring for the bit that I played, because, I was like at level 60 something, and I hadn't even gotten through the vast majority of the bosses. I still haven't, but Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, because if that's the case, I kind of want to, if whenever I get back to Dark Souls 2, go ahead, try to just wipe out all the enemies that I can, so that way I won't have to deal with them if or when I die to a boss and having to backtrack so many times and get through all the enemies. If I can just wipe them all out, go to the bosses until I beat them, of course, and keep going, and then come back later in case, because, or at least for when I will need to, say, grind enemies for certain items for like covenants or something like that. I would rather do it that way, so that way I don't have to deal with them, when I don't want to. But then when I do need to grind for them, I can just, I can not have to worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it should have them respawn after you go into that covenant. I mean, it seems like it has to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely that. I'm definitely glad you told me about that, because that was definitely interesting to hear that you actually could get them to respawn without having to bump the game difficulty up, because that would not be a fun time at all.
Yeah.
So that's definitely good to know. And then going back to Minecraft, very interesting that you mentioned that, and because I for the longest time I never played the game either, even though I wanted to play the game. But when I first tried to play the game, it was on my old basic laptop, and that was not running the game at all. Even at like, say, it wasn't even, I don't think it was hitting like even 20. So I first tried it actually on the Wii U version. I played it there. So when you say it, you think it hits 60, I would believe you. Considering the fact that the Wii U played it at 30 and the Switch is more powerful than a Wii U, I would be willing to bet it should hit 60. I don't see why it wouldn't be able to do it.
I mean, the main thing is I'm not sure if it's keeping 60 with 2 players. With co-op on the same Switch. I mean, I've never looked into it, and I mean, to me it looks fine, but it might just be, like, because I'm used to the Switch where it always, I mean, where it's like 30 is the norm for most games. So it probably, looking at the footage again, it probably is only 30 when it's multiplayer. It might be 60 when it's single, but I honestly have no idea. I haven't looked into it.
But yeah, and I've been meaning to get back into the game, at least on PC, because I bought a code, or at least I bought a code from, like, I think Walmart some time ago, and I redeemed it, but just trying to get it set up, because I think I was trying to use my old Java account for when I originally was just starting with Minecraft, and I couldn't really get that set up. So I'm not sure if I have to try to see if I can link it to my Microsoft Xbox account and then see if that can work or not. But it seems, at least for me, trying to get back in on PC, it's a bit of a headache, just because trying to link the old account, or what I had an old account, with the new Microsoft version. But yeah, when I definitely played on Wii U, it definitely was interesting, and after I sort of learned how it worked, it was pretty enjoyable. So I mean, I would want to get back into that myself, but good stuff though.
Cool. All right. Anything else before we get into the news?
No, sir.
All right. So I'm going to let you start off by taking this story about the Xbox handheld.
Yeah. So there was an announcement a few days ago from Windows Central by Jez Corden talking about Xbox possibly having a new handheld set for this year, and also the next generation of consoles that are targeting 2027. And so from Jez Corden said, let me see a good spot to start. Essentially, okay. Oh wait. Okay, so sorry, there was a small update here I saw. And essentially, there is a potential new handheld coming out, which has the codename Kennen, which originally it said Keenan, but it's actually Kennen with two N's. Um, it's the code name for this new handheld, reportedly, and Microsoft is working with a PC gaming OEM. It's not specified what company it is, but it's something possibly akin to Asus, Lenovo, MSI, something like that, to work on an Xbox branded gaming handheld. And it's potentially slated for release later this year. And the article says it's going to look unmistakably Xbox, and it's going to have an Xbox official guide button and other types of designs. And based on what Jez says, it's possibly going to be more PC oriented than maybe just like Xbox OS oriented, which is interesting. Although he also says that it should, if it is going to be, if Microsoft is going to have full reins, it should cut out a lot of the third party bloat they says are stuff like the Lenovo Legion Go or the Asus ROG Ally. So that is essentially everything. Although he also said that this new, or at least the internal successor to the Xbox Series X and S, has been fully greenlit by up to the CEO, and that the plans to have this, or at least the new successor to the Series X, alongside its own Xbox gaming handheld, which seemingly could be an additional, or at least a newer Xbox handheld, apart from the one which is coming out in 2025, would be coming out in 2027. And that is essentially everything that we know so far. But what are your thoughts on this handheld?
Well, I have to say, first of all, I will believe it when I see it, that it's actually coming this year. The idea that it's not a successor definitely makes me more willing to believe this is possible. That their actual successor is not coming until 2027. But, I mean, I don't know. If Microsoft announces it, then obviously I'll believe it. But if they don't announce it, I'm going to remain a bit skeptical on the matter. I think that it would be great if they actually did this. It would be fantastic because, I mean, I think it would sell really well, especially if they actually did have something that had a bit more Xbox flair to it, I guess you could say. I guess more Xbox branding is what I mean to say. And yeah, the Xbox consoles haven't sold well, at least not compared with, the PlayStation. But there's still, I mean, this is a market that I believe you could probably get a lot of Xbox gamers to jump into. And, I keep hearing the arguments all the time from both from PlayStation fanboys and just from people in general that that Xbox is basically dead, that they're not going to be bringing any more consoles in the future and all this stuff, and that Microsoft is going to abandon hardware because of what they're doing with Game Pass and with putting their games everywhere and all of this stuff. But I've been saying for a long time, and I still firmly believe it, even with this all-in third-party approach that they're taking now, that their software, their subscription services, this stuff can fund their ability to continue to make hardware. And they're going to continue to make legacy, Xbox hardware for people who want it. Even if it doesn't sell as many units, especially, with the theory idea. I think I heard this from VG Fight School. Great channel. Check him out if you haven't already. He talked a lot about that basically, at least the way he's looking at it, and I think he might have gotten it from somewhere else, I can't remember, is that Xbox is going to basically consider the next generation hardware to be a continuation of Series X and Series S, and that Series X and Series S will still get all the same games. And basically that means that they just have a larger player base to work with, in addition to the fact that they'll also, they still have PCs that are going to play the games. They have streaming, they have PS5, probably PS6 when the time comes. They're just going to continue to have, even though not everybody's going to have access to Game Pass, because Game Pass is going to be, well, it'll be basically everywhere except for PlayStation and Nintendo, most likely. There's going to be more options for people. They're going to have the option. A lot of people have the option for Game Pass, whether it's through an Xbox console or a PC, or through mobile device or streaming or whatever you. But then they'll also have the option to just outright buy the games, both on Xbox and all those other places. So, with all of that being said, I think that I don't see any reason why Xbox would have to stop making hardware. I'm sure eventually they'll stop making hardware, but honestly, I think it's going to be just as long as it's going to take for PlayStation to stop making hardware. It's just that PlayStation, they have not really gotten into this new way of doing things yet. They're still very much set in the old way of doing everything, and as a result, they're kind of in like this really weird spot. And I think that both can continue to be successful. I think Microsoft is ahead of the game, essentially, in terms of the way that they're doing things. And this is, me saying this as someone who is not particularly a Microsoft fan. Like, I like some of the games, but I like more PlayStation's games than Microsoft's games. But I like what Microsoft is doing in general from a consumer perspective with all the different options they're giving people, more than I like what PlayStation is doing. Although I think that PlayStation is at least somewhat moving in the right direction. They're just not quite there yet. And I don't think Xbox's strategy is perfect by any stretch. I think that there's still a lot of kinks that need to be worked out, but I do think the subscription service is more profitable than people realize. And that they're probably realistically making more money than PlayStation when it comes down to it, because PlayStation sells more consoles and technically sells more games, but their operating expenses versus their profits are much different, because Microsoft has that consistent source of revenue every month. PlayStation has spikes when they have their big games, and whatever they get from third-party games as well, obviously. Microtransactions, that sort of thing. It's not that they're doing poorly. They're obviously still making money, but I think that it is just very short-sighted to look at it as, because PlayStation is doing relatively well in the old way of doing things, that they can continue that long term, whereas Microsoft is doing things in a completely different way, which from an old mindset doesn't seem sustainable. But if you think about it more and more, you can come to realize, there's actually a lot more to this than what they think. And Microsoft has said to their investors, not just to customers, but to their investors, that Game Pass is profitable. They cannot lie to their investors, because if they lie to their investors, they get in big trouble. And not just like, someone like sends an angry email or whatever. It's like they get in legal trouble if they lie to their investors. And they have been telling their investors Game Pass is profitable. So, if they're talking to just us regular Joes and Jims and Jim Bobs or whatever, they can lie to us till they're blue in the face. But when they're talking to their investors, they can't lie about that stuff. They have to be honest, because these people are invested in the company. They have an actual financial stake in the company, and that's completely different from just the average gamer. So anyway, I think that's everything I have to say on the matter. I know it kind of went off on a tangent, but to TLDL, what I said, I will believe that this handheld is coming this year when it's officially announced. And until then, I remain skeptical, but I think it's a great idea, and I hope that they do it. I hope PlayStation does it too. PlayStation needs to do it too. It would be smart. They just have to actually support it. That's the one problem. But anyway.
Yeah, I agree that Microsoft does seem to be thinking of the long game rather than just short-term victories, as far as trying to expand, get their games on every platform, or at least as many platforms as they can. And, even though they might not sell as many consoles or hardware as Sony, they still have that revenue coming in from multiple streams rather than just one or two dedicated areas. But I'm, as far as this handheld goes, I'm not certain how I feel about it because if it was, based on what it seems here, it's essentially just another Windows handheld,
Yeah.
which, sure, it has Microsoft's branding, which definitely I think will help, but at the same time, what would help differentiate itself from all the other Windows-based handhelds?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if this was solely an Xbox handheld, if this was just using Xbox's OS, that would be better because some people might say, well, for one thing, if it is Windows based, they can't play their actual Xbox games unless it's an Xbox that's compatible with Xbox games for Windows or Game Pass for Windows. So if it's just like an Xbox only game or Xbox Game Pass game, they can't play their games, which would definitely be a turnoff for many Xbox gamers. Which is why I'm, skeptical to wonder how well could this actually do. And also for people who are Xbox gamers, sure, people gave, like, say, the other handhelds and the Steam Deck a chance. Would they say, well, it's another gaming, primarily targeting, Xbox users? They would say, what's to stop them from saying, oh, it's just a PC, it's still going to be complicated like a PC? That's why I'm wondering if there still might be some imaginary barrier that would stop them, just because the fact that saying, oh, it's still just a PC, I don't want to game on PC, it's complicated and stuff. I don't know if that's something that could be a barrier or not. That's why I'm skeptical on that end. But if they do have an actual handheld that is coming with the next Xbox that is using the Xbox OS software, then I think that definitely could be successful. Because I think definitely if you're playing your Xbox console, whether it's the Series X or even if it's the next generation of Xbox, and you say, all right, cool, I'm playing it here, I want to take it with me, my game with me on the go now, then you just take your handheld, play it in public, continue where you left off, similar to, a perfected, not as perfect as a Nintendo Switch, but similar to Steam Deck, where if you're playing on your desktop and then continue playing on your Steam Deck or something like that, or even your other PC gaming handheld, something like that, then I think that would be very good. I think that would be a great thing to have. So that I would see being successful, but just as it is now, if it is, assuming this is all true, just if it is just another Windows handheld, I'm just uncertain about how well that could do. Now, of course, if it does remove a lot of the bloat from third-party software, that's great. Granted, I would also kind of want them to also remove some of the bloat that is in Windows itself, because there is stuff like the Windows Store, and then some other stuff. Now, granted, it could be cut out. It could be a more lighter version of Windows, but I still think that there is some stuff there that could still also just be cut out and left that would make things a whole lot better for the end user. But we'll definitely have to see where this all goes, because this is all still speculation and rumor. If it is true, granted, part of me thinks that if it is a Windows-based handheld, I'm more likely to see this as actually being true, because I think Microsoft could. I think it's quite easy for Microsoft to be working with some company. Now, they might not necessarily be working with someone like Asus or MSI, since they already have their own gaming handhelds, and that would just sort of be a conflict of interest, I think. But there are still definitely others out there. I know Dell was trying to get something with Alienware at least a few years before the Steam Deck came out, and that never happened. So Microsoft could be working with them for all we know to get a handheld out. But I think if it is third party and it is, just Windows handheld, I believe it could happen this year. if it is using you know, Xbox OS, then I definitely would be skeptical of it happening, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, for sure. All right, sounds good. Well, we're not going to cover all the topics tonight because it's already getting pretty late, but I do want to talk about a couple other things. First of all, Doom: The Dark Ages. So originally, when we got the specs listed, they were pretty beefy. I mean, not like insane, but definitely a lot higher than both of the previous Doom games in this trilogy. And according to GameSpace, this is unconfirmed by either id or by Bethesda, the minimum requirements and the recommended requirements have lowered dramatically. And if this is true, it's pretty obvious that they decided to make ray tracing not mandatory, because I mean, if they can optimize it to run on significantly weaker hardware, then it definitely doesn't require ray tracing, because in fact the minimum requirements are not even an RTX card, so they do not have ray tracing capabilities. The recommended requirements are a low end RTX card. So just briefly go over this. Minimum requirements: Intel Core i5 9600K or AMD Ryzen 5 2600X, 8 gigs of RAM, which really is not much at all. For GPU, either a GTX 1660, NVIDIA GTX 1660, or AMD Radeon RX 580. Isn't that the one that you have?
Yes.
So 50 gigs of available space on the hard drive, not surprising at all. Requires an SSD for optimal performance, also not surprising. Recommended requirements: an i7 10700K or an AMD Ryzen 3700X, Ryzen 7 3700X, 16 gigs of RAM, GPU of either an RTX 3060 or an AMD Radeon RX 6700 XT, and same storage space with an SSD. So we don't, like I said, none of this is confirmed yet, but what are your thoughts?
It would be incredible if this is true. It would definitely be something, or at least in my opinion, it would be a looks like Doom's back on the menu, boys.
Yes.
And
I think that's the title for this week's episode.
Because this is great, the fact that, because of the fact that ray tracing is, if it's true, no longer a requirement, more people would be able to play the game without having to upgrade. And sure, RTX and ray tracing is becoming, or at least GPUs having those capabilities are more common these days, but there are still people who are using perfectly fine older GPUs and stuff like that. So I don't think ray tracing should be a standard or should be a requirement to play a game, even if it's
Agreed.
a newer game. I always think that something like that should be an option that you can enable if you want to, but if you don't want to, that's fine. So it's definitely great, and I mean, granted, I'm not on a 580 anymore, but knowing that my old GPU would have been able to play this game would have been great. And something interesting too, and I don't know if it's because of the ray tracing or if it's just better optimization or something else, but even with the storage, I think it's interesting is because, at least based on what I'm seeing here on Steam, it's currently 100 gigs that you need for storage. So it's effectively being cut in half, which is insane.
Probably 4K textures were the reason why it was so high.
Right.
My guess is that that'll all just be optional download, would be my guess.
Yeah, which I think is possibly something that, I kind of like in a sense, because it definitely saves space for people who don't necessarily want to use 4K textures,
right.
and also kind of like just want to have as much space as possible. So I mean, I definitely could see that happening because I mean, some games do actually have that where you can download the textures as a separate
Yeah.
free DLC. But I definitely think overall this is great. I hope it's true. And I mean, also that would mean the Steam Deck would be able to
And the
play
Switch
this
too.
as well. Oh, and the Switch too. I mean, granted, if the Switch 2,
it's gonna be.
I
On
think
the
Switch 2 would be able to do it.
There's no way it won't be on the Switch 2. I mean, they put the last two
Yeah.
games on the Switch, and those were all things considered good ports. I mean, 30 frames per second and not the best looking, but especially like Doom Eternal was really impressive what they did with that. It actually looks quite good. Doom 2016 was kind of like, it was fine. It worked. But yeah, it will be on Switch 2 for sure, guaranteed.
Oh yeah, yeah. So definitely, this looks good. But we'll just have to wait and see, and hopefully, sometime soon we'll see the recommendations and system requirements change on the actual page. But good stuff though.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, if this is real, then it definitely is very good news for all of PC gamers and just for gaming in general, because this is something that developers should be doing. They should be optimizing their games to run on lower spec hardware, because the great thing is if you optimize to run well on lower spec hardware, then the stronger hardware is going to run the games even better. And it just gets better from there. That's something that I really get irritated about when it comes to especially like just console fanboys in general, but PlayStation fanboys in particular, is that they'll argue that like the Xbox Series S is holding back gaming because of the fact that it's not as powerful as the the PS5 or the PS5 Pro. And while I understand what they're saying in terms of more power means the developers have more room to do stuff, the problem is that what so many of these developers are doing is, instead of actually making a quality game and focusing first on making a great game that runs well, they're just trying to make it look as pretty as possible, add all these visual effects, because they know that that's what sells, especially to PlayStation gamers, that they want a lot of them, and this isn't every single one, be very clear about this, but they want the best looking possible game, something that makes them feel like their hardware was worth the purchase, like they made a good investment. But the problem is that when they do all these things, then they end up with a situation where the games run terribly because they haven't focused on optimization, because they're so focused on visuals. And the visuals have not improved that much since last gen. I mean, they're better in some ways, but most of it is just like, okay, at best you're getting 60 frames per second on games. And, whereas on PC, most of the time our minimum is like 60 frames should be the bare minimum of what we're getting on PC, because there's no reason we shouldn't be able to get more, especially when we have hardware that's powerful enough to do more than that, or we can adjust settings to get better performance if we so desire that. But the Series S, I mean, like the developers of which game was it? I want to say it was Baldur's Gate 3, but no, it wasn't Baldur's Gate 3. There was something else, some other recent game that the developers were saying that they were thankful for the Series S because the Series S helped them to better optimize the game so that it could run better on other hardware. Having the Series S as their baseline. And I think that that's a great way of putting it. And the fact that you're getting that from a developer really says a lot too. Because that's the other thing is, I mean, one of the things that's great that we've talked about all the time with PC gaming is that you start off, I mean, if you have a game that is optimized properly, it can start with the lower spec stuff. And then as soon as you add more power to your system, your game is going to run better by default. I mean, with the only real exceptions being games that have like hard caps on them. Like, for example, games like Shenmue and Okami HD, where it's hard capped at 30 frames per second. And it's just like, why? Why must you do this? And then I guess if you unlock it on those games, then it actually really, like, the game has all sorts of weird glitches and stuff because it's just not coded properly. But you know, it's like that's the thing that I love about PC gaming. It's like I can come back to games that, you know, when I tried playing them 15 years ago on my laptop, they didn't run the greatest. I mean, some of them ran perfectly fine, and then some of them were, you know, running probably sub 60. I remember particularly running Grand Theft Auto 4. It's like it looked way better than the PS3 version, but it ran terrible. And like at the time, I didn't really care because I was more used to consoles, and so it's like it didn't bother me. But now I'm like, oh man, that was bad. That was horrible. Like I remember there was one time I was trying to use a mod in Grand Theft Auto 4 to be the Hulk, and the frame rate just tanked when I was doing that. I was like throwing cars at helicopters and stuff, and it was hilarious. But of course, it got old pretty quickly and just run. I mean, like I knew it ran poorly at that point, and that was really poorly. Before that, it was like it was bad. I don't know how bad it was because I wasn't really sensitive to it at that time. But you know, I look back at those games that didn't run very well on my laptop, and I can play those same games today, and most of them will run at my max refresh rate, and you know, with all the settings maxed out. And it's like you can't do that with consoles because they're hard capped. The developers have to enable you to do those things. And I think there might be rare situations where it does it automatically, where it's coded in such a way that it can do that. But with PC, the great thing is that most games, they're just coded where it's all a matter of what hardware you have. If you have better hardware, your game will run better. Your game can look better. I mean, yes, there's some limitations when it comes to looks because there's only so high you can go before you reach a ceiling of what the game has built in, unless you have mods that can improve it further. But all that being said, I am happy that these requirements are the way they are. I already knew that I was going to be able to run Doom the Dark Ages easily. And I can tell you one thing. Even when I upgrade my PC, even though my PC will undoubtedly be much more capable of doing ray tracing consistently and still get a really good frame rate, I am going to keep it off as much as possible because I just dislike ray tracing that much. I would rather have the extra frames. Thank you very much. Oh, I didn't mention, just a quick side note with that, is that my monitor is not only OLED, but it also has HDR. So I've wanted to have an HDR screen for a while, especially with since I've experienced it on the Steam Deck, and it's typically pretty nice having that. So having both is like you get the super bright glossy OLED screen plus the more solid blacks from the HDR. It's just like, yes. Anyway, that's all I have to say on Doom the Dark Ages. All right, any other thoughts from you on that?
No, sir.
All right, so for our last topic for tonight, my favorite game of all time, Chrono Trigger, is turning 30 years old this year. And fans, of course, have been requesting remakes of this game for a really long time. You know, especially since the HD 2D thing came up, it's come up repeatedly. People would love to see that for this game. Some people have said they want a 3D remake. I'm against that, but we'll get into that more later. Square Enix has said that it plans to release various projects related to Chrono Trigger to celebrate the game's 30th anniversary. The exact quote here: as we mark the 30th anniversary, we will be launching various projects that go beyond the world of the game over the next year to express our gratitude to everyone who has played Chrono Trigger so far. So please look forward to it. And that is essentially what we have. The only other thing I will note is that despite what people fail to realize, Chrono Trigger does have a sequel. It's called Chrono Cross. It came out in 1999, was remastered, I think that was 2023. It was either 2023 or 2024. I can't remember. I have the physical on Switch. I loved Chrono Cross as well, even though Chrono Trigger is still a much better game. But anyway, we don't really know what they're actually going to do with this. So before I get into my thoughts, my theories on the matter as a hardcore Chrono Trigger fan. What are yours?
It's very nice that Square is acknowledging Chrono Trigger's anniversary. There are certain companies that are not acknowledging their anniversaries for the year, like Sony and Bloodborne. But it's good that Square is, showing some love and actually has plans for doing something. What they are, we don't know. We can really only speculate. Maybe. I mean, I agree with you. I would not want to see any sort of 3D remake because I feel like that would, in a sense, rob the charm that the original game had. Now, a 2D HD remake, I could accept that. I would find that more acceptable because it would essentially just be a polishing of the original game, especially if they just keep everything essentially the same. I would like that, but I feel like that's at most everything I would want to see as far as them actually handling the game. Now, as far as what they could do, that's up in the air. I mean, the article mentioned stuff like, or at least what they did in the past with like having an audio novel and I think maybe a few other things that were made, or I think around the time of the Chrono Cross remake, and I feel like something like that could happen. They might do something similar to, I think with the Nier games, where they could do something like release an anime. That's something that I could see possibly happening. Or they might try to expand the series. Like they could do stuff that that's similar with what Japan does with certain franchises. Like, oh, we'll get some light novels released, or we might have some audio dramas released, or, I mean, they could even also have some live concert performances, orchestral performances, doing tours, sort of like with Final Fantasy and Distant Worlds tours. So, like, they could do something like that. That would be pretty cool. And I mean, I've actually been to a Distant Worlds tour, and that was good, especially seeing Nobuo Uematsu on stage. That was awesome. But they could do something like that with Chrono Trigger. Outside of that, or outside of those things, I'm not entirely certain what they could do. But that's just like me thinking about the typical Japanese franchise stuff they do outside of a game. That's at most what I could think happening, or at least maybe they one other thing they could possibly do is do some sort of crossover, or do some crossovers. Like, for example, they could do a Chrono Trigger crossover with Final Fantasy 14. That's something they could do, or something like that, I would say. But that's essentially everything that I can think of.
Yeah, you definitely had more ideas than I did. So some of this is going to be kind of more of a wish list, like what I would like to see as a big fan of the original game, particularly the Super Nintendo version. That's really my favorite version. But I think HD 2D remake, basically keep almost everything exactly the same in terms of the I mean, like, obviously the visuals would be upgraded to do, with the HD 2D thing, but no additional content. They don't need to add any extra content. I don't want them to add the extra content. I think that everything that's already there is great. I mean, although I doubt that they would do this, I don't want them to include the extra side stuff that they added in the DS version because it was garbage. They added like 2 side quests, and then they added like a monster training thing, and they were all awful. Like, the side quests just it was ridiculous padding. One of them, you're literally having to run up and down a mountain like 20 times, and it's a long trek up and down. It's ridiculous, and it's like, why did you even do this? This was a complete waste of time. Especially because every other side quest in that game, in the original version and the PS1 version, just like peak excellence. Like, there was nothing bad about them, at least as far as I can think of. And I mean, I played the game multiple times. I mean, it is my favorite game of all time, without question. And I just think like it was such an expertly designed game. The battle system was great, the music was great, the story was great, the characters were great. The length of the game was just right. Like it was right around, I mean, to complete it once through, it's like 20 hours. Great, fairly short game, but you could play it through it a bunch more because there was a bunch of endings. And they did, the one thing that I do really like that they added with the DS version was they added an additional ending that linked it to Chrono Cross. And I thought that was really cool. But apart from that, I feel like most of the stuff is, I mean, the extra stuff on the DS wasn't really neat. But anyway, going back to what I would like to see, I would like it for them to have a completely re-recorded orchestral version of the soundtrack, but have the option to switch between the two. In fact, I think it would be great if they had the option to switch between the two, both with the visuals and the soundtrack. That would be fantastic, because then you could have something that's for both the original fans or people who just want to experience it and it's as close to its original form as possible, and the people who want to have that just enough of an upgrade to where there's no offensiveness to it to those of us who love the original so much. But then it would also give me more motivation to actually play it again, because it's like every time I start playing, I'm just like, I really should play something else, because I played this game a bunch of times. I love it, but I don't really need to replay it again. I've replayed it too many times already. Like, I would say apart from, I mean, the Super Nintendo version is my favorite overall, just because I felt like it was the most, it was a complete package. It was expertly made. The DS version I like better only in some of the additional features it added. I like the fact that you have the map on the lower screen. That was super useful. Being able to have all the menu stuff on the lower screen if you wanted to, but you could still have some of it up on the top screen if you wanted to as well. There's some just quality of life things that were nice about it, but I thought that the side stuff they added was stupid and terrible and just unnecessary padding. And I mean, if they could rework those to actually make them good side quests, then maybe I'd be okay with it. But I figure most likely, if they do the HD2D remake, they're going to include that stuff too. I just hope that if they do, they find some way to improve it instead of making it, instead of just having it in its form that's absolute garbage. So, yeah. But anyway, I think that's everything I have to say on the matter.
Do you know which version the Steam version is based off of?
Mobile version.
Ah, okay. Does that one have any elements from the DS version?
Yeah. So the mobile version is basically the DS version on a single screen. Okay. But they initially had put in like some weird texture smoothing stuff that was just like that weird Vaseline kind of thing to it, and it was just like it lost a lot of the charm. But I think that the Steam version that they initially released it that way, and then they did updates to it to make it the way it's supposed to be, which is the way it is now. I mean, I guess technically I would almost say if it wasn't for the load times, the PS1 version would probably be the best version, because it does include a lot of that extra content. Or I mean, like it includes all the animated cutscenes, like in the Dragon Ball Z style, because of course all the characters and everything was designed by Akira Toriyama, and so that part was cool. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, technically we have currently the definitive version. I just think that there are ways that they could make it even better. So that's all I have to say.
Nothing else from me.
All right. Well, I think we're just going to call it here. So let's do our recommendations and dissuasions. Go ahead and start us off.
All right. So just a couple quick recommendations. And first one is if you have a micro center near you, and granted, it might be a little bit too late by now, but you could still check back periodically. I would recommend going there if you want to try to get a new GPU, because those seem to, or at least for the Radeon RX 90 series, they definitely seem to have more stock than trying to get one online. I know, and especially since I went several days after the GPU's launch and there were ones available still in store, they definitely had a good, if not decent amount of stock available. So definitely, if you have one relatively close to you, or at least within a reasonable driving distance, definitely try going there to pick one up, because going online is going to be a toss-up with bots and scalpers. Second recommendation is if it's warm enough for you, temperatures are warming up depending on where you live, but if it's warm enough, I definitely recommend going out, and especially with daylight saving being a thing now, definitely go out for an evening walk. It's weather's nice, and it's get a pretty good exercise in too. So those are my recommendations.
All right, good stuff. All right, well, my recommendations are specifically related to Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2. So this one is a general recommendation for all the Dark Souls games. Probably affects Elden Ring, maybe Demon Souls. I'm not positive about that. But that is that if you want to get better at parrying, use the Buckler Shield, because it is much easier to parry with that. I know there's also a shield that can parry spells, but I haven't tried it yet, and I haven't needed it either. So I don't remember what the name of the shield is. I know I have it. I just haven't tried using it because I haven't needed to. If I come across any bosses that use spells that get annoying, then I might try that out and see if I can manage it. But anyway, so there's that. Best way to learn how to parry, in my opinion. In Dark Souls 2, I want to recommend that you utilize NPC summons when you're dealing with annoying areas with lots of enemies. You may be like me, and initially you don't want to do it because too prideful and you just want to actually get through it all yourself, but when you're having to go through areas over and over and over, and you keep having to deal with the same enemies over and over and over, sometimes having that NPC can just be a breath of fresh air. Make it easier to get through to get back to the boss. And if you don't want to bring them in the boss, you can always banish them after you get to the boss room. And I probably should do that realistically. But anyway, that is what I have for recommendations.
Good stuff. I didn't know you could actually parry magic, so that's interesting to know.
There is a shield that does it. I just have never tried it before. But yeah. All right, dissuasions.
All right, dissuasion 1 is going to be don't spend more than $130 over MSRP for a GPU. Now, of course, if you're trying to get one that has the better cooling from the third-party vendors and it, has overclocking abilities built in, sure, spend extra money on it, but don't spend so much money to the point that it's ridiculous. And I mean, like, we see scalpers out here overselling, but some of these third-party partners are also trying to scalp users by overcharging them for something that shouldn't be as much as they are charging and should be a whole lot cheaper. So definitely do not spend that much money over MSRP for a GPU. Second dissuasion is going to be don't buy The Last Case of Benedict Fox, even if it's on sale, because that game is just so unoptimized. The performance is horrible that I cannot recommend it at all. And I mean, I got it as part of a Fanatical bundle, but I still feel like I was ripped off in that point, and so I would say don't even get the game if it was being given away. Like, that's how much I think it's not worth it. So don't play the game, don't buy it, don't get it at all. That's all I got.
All right, fair enough. All right, my dissuasion is going to be another one for Dark Souls 2, and that is do not join the Champion's Covenant unless you want to go through the game without NPC summons. Yes, it can be beneficial if you want to just grind enemies. That is the one situation where I could see it being helpful, but if you actually want to be able to utilize NPC summons at all, don't go with this covenant. And also, if you don't want to have to deal with enemies constantly respawning in areas where they're just really, really annoying, don't join this covenant. That's what I got.
Very good.
All right, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel, I am Xeracon, that's IAMXERACON, so youtube.com/@IamXeracon. No new videos out this week, but as I said earlier, I should have one coming out. Should be Monday if the last thing I need comes in over the weekend and then I can record stuff, so we'll see what happens then.
All right. Well, you can find me on my YouTube gaming channel at TheFrozenGamer87. There's also a Rumble channel for that. However, it doesn't have a custom URL, so and right now there's nothing posted there just because I have not gotten to it. So just keep in mind it is going to start including my content from my YouTube channel. I just haven't had time to get it on the channel yet. But there's no new content that has been put up in a couple weeks. However, I am going to be doing my 24-hour Extra Life stream for my 6th year in a row, coming up on Friday, the 21st of March, so 1 week from the day that you'll be hearing this. And I'll be raising money for the Extra Life charity, which gives money to children's hospitals to help both the kids who are dealing with cancer, but also parents who just could use the extra help in terms of whether it's financial or providing things to help their kids get through the difficulty of treatments and all of that. And it's a charity that I'm really very much I don't know how to put it, what's the best phrasing to put it, but it's this is my 6th year in a row doing a 24-hour stream to raise money for that charity, and I don't have any plans to stop as long as I'm living. So something that I really truly care about as both a father and as someone who has had one of my nephews had cancer when he was 4 years old, and I mean, thankfully he survived through it, and now he's 15, but 15 going on 16 actually, very close to 16, but it's very near and dear to my heart. That's what I was looking for. So yeah, I'll be doing that, and I'll be sure to post links on that. I'm going to try to stream both on Rumble and YouTube, but I have to contact Rumble and see what I can find out about that. It's possible that it may end up being only YouTube still this year, and then by the time Stack Up rolls around, I'd be able to do both. So we'll just kind of see how that goes. But otherwise, I also have my YouTube cooking channel, Not Authentic But Delicious. Once again, also on Rumble, and that one, once again, does not have any content on it on the Rumble side just yet. That is in process, but I haven't put up any new videos yet, but there will probably be something in the not too distant future. I'm guessing it's probably going to be more like a couple weeks before I can put something up, because this next week I'm not going to have time to work on any of that, since I have to get everything prepped and tested for my 24-hour Extra Life stream. So but either way, lots of great recipes on there. Last recipe I put up was a Thai curry chicken pizza, and it was delicious. So yeah. And then of course there is the channel for the podcast, both on YouTube and Rumble. On YouTube it's at the Orange Box Podcast, and on Rumble it doesn't have a custom URL, but it is there. It does have it has to have the last 4 episodes of the podcast, I think, because it has last week's, and then I put the previous 3 weeks. Eventually I'll get all the episodes up. It's just gonna take some time to get them all downloaded and then re-uploaded to Rumble. So either way, you can check it out on YouTube and Rumble. It's a video version of the podcast every Friday, 7 a.m. Central Time, barring any issues with the upload, which it seems like it's just impossible to not have issues. I have had issues every single week, and it's usually just something that I did wrong. So anyway, Video version of the podcast not only shows our beautiful faces, but also clips from games we've been playing and things that we're talking about as well. And then we have the Pod Clips channel, so clips from the podcast from all the different segments, both on YouTube and on Rumble. On YouTube, that's at the Orange Box Pod Clips. On Rumble, once again, no custom URL yet. That one, I didn't get the clips from last week's episode posted yet for either channel. I mean, for either YouTube or Rumble. I have them more or less ready to go. I just haven't had a chance to do it. So it'll probably be something that I get those uploaded tomorrow while I'm editing the podcast. Most likely. At least, last week's clips. So anyway, yeah, you can check out Orange Box Pod Clips on either YouTube or Rumble. And there will be clips on both going forward, especially because the nice thing is Rumble has it set up that if you upload to Rumble, you can have it upload to YouTube at the same time. So it's very nifty, very, very, very nifty. So I'm going to be taking advantage of that. The only thing that's bad is that Rumble has a file size limit of 15 gigs, which is fine for most videos, but for my videos that are longer or in 4K, it's a little more tricky. So I'm still kind of navigating around that, and I'll figure it out. It's not going to be it's going to really be a problem mostly for the comparison videos, which I do want to mention. One last thing about that with the comparisons. In terms of the OLED comparisons, right now I'm only planning to do 2 more total. And then after the Switch 2 comes out, I'm going to be doing them as often as I can. So hopefully there'll actually be some performance patches for Switch 2 to play some of those games so that I can do them in the improved format for everything. But yeah. So yeah, but the last 2 games I'll be doing, Freedom Wars Remastered, as I mentioned before, and then Persona 5 Tactica at some point, although I don't have it on Steam yet, so I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm going to try to get both of those done, though, before the Switch 2 launches. And those are going to be the last 2 for that series. Okay, but anyway, I think that is everything. Oh, the audio-only version of the podcast goes live on every major podcast platform. YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and probably some others that I can't remember off the top of my head. But it goes live all those 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday morning. And that's all the same content, just without the video. So that should be everything. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zaracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast, and until next time, get your taxes filed. Get it done. Just do it. Get it over with. Orange Box Podcast. Out.